Deputy Director General.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Nadim, very nice to see you and seeing all those that are interested in joining the online event is really amazing. Unfortunately, I wish we could have it in Brussels in person, but today there is a general strike, so our building is locked. We cannot enter the building here in Brussels, but it would have been difficult for colleagues to join to Brussels since airports are closed as well. But I want first to thank the OECD for the very hard work that you have put in this report, because the work that the European Social Fund has been doing for years in promoting social innovation, in helping better understand the possibilities of social innovation for a number of positive outcomes, like social inclusion, like job creation, like involving partners, non-governmental organizations, and also taking care of most vulnerable people as a start, using different new approaches to solving problems is really very valuable. We know and we have different experiences among the countries. It's very nice that we have in the report the reflection of what the European Social Fund has been doing so far, but also what changes have been introduced in national policies due to social innovation testing and approaches. And when an experimented social innovation approach becomes part of the mainstream policy, that's really the best. That's really the sustainability of the approach. I want to also refer to it's not only the European countries or OECD countries that are interested in social innovation as an important tool for solving problems that are not solved easily with traditional methods and instruments, by referring to Luxembourg Declaration, which was adopted on 10th, 11th of April in Luxembourg, where the Luxembourg Minister of Labor and Social Policy organized a worldwide meeting. And there were 41 countries present. The colleagues from OECD were there, the World Bank, the ILO, UNDP, to set up, first to adopt the declaration, but also set up a first Global Government Council on Social Innovation. And this is another proof that social innovation is considered worldwide as a very important tool and a very important method of solving social issues. With European, I think that our experience in Europe with European Social Fund can also be an inspiration, give some ideas, give some impetus to developing social innovation throughout the world. And I believe that the report should be promoted as well worldwide. And I would suggest that we share it with the members of the Global Government Council on Social Innovation as a first step. Let me just say that this report comes also in a very important moment when we are considering and shaping up the future. And clearly, we will continue supporting social innovation efforts at different levels, with different countries, with different stakeholders, and definitely with a lot of engagement of public authorities, because sometimes a very good project, if it's not promoted to the public authorities, it will not be scaled up and become sustainable. And I think that the 3S framework I like very much, but because that's really giving a guidance on how to start, but also how to make it sustainable. And I appreciate the chart as well of your report. So I think the report is really a ready-to-use manual. And that's why I say we should promote it broadly and widely, because it can bring success to social innovations with a longer term perspective and not only solving a local imminent problem. And the inclusion of 12 case studies funded by DSF so far are also a good demonstration of how different are the problems and how innovative, creative, and different can be the solutions to these problems. So I also want to congratulate again the colleagues from OECD who have worked and compiled this very rich report, but also very clear guiding on future efforts. And I think that all practitioners, our community of practice that has been strongly involved in the preparation of the reporting, contributing with cases, but also your experience with countries beyond the European Union is a valuable approach to really make social innovation a traditional tool, thinking out of the box, not of mainstream policies, but also allowing for more creativity and more innovation for solving social issues, and always looking for the social impact of the efforts. I'm a true believer that social innovation goes hand in hand with social economy and solidarity economy, and that's always been an attempt to make sure that social innovation is also coming up with support for social enterprises, be it before or after. And also we have started the presentation of social innovation projects to the ESF Plus committee, our community where we meet all member states and national and EU level social partners to discuss successful projects where we have social innovation, also through support for micro enterprises, social economy enterprises, and linking innovation and social economy in a more coherent way. So I'll stop here because I want to listen to the discussion, and I hope everybody will enjoy today, although it's a short one, but a good exchange. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Deputy Director General. We heard the call to disseminate widely, and we're pleased to have over 200 participants already to help starting with that dissemination. I'd like to pass it now to Nadim Ahmad, the Deputy Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities here at the OECD. Nadim, please.
Super. Thanks, Karen, and thanks also, Adriana, for the excellent, I think, opening remarks. And I took away a number of points that I wanted to reinforce in your opening remarks. I mean, the importance of demonstrating the diversity of social innovation in terms of the applicability across a wide range of different policy areas, the importance of mainstreaming the approach, and I'll say a bit more about that in a second, the underlying creative nature of social innovation, and of course the ability, I think, to tackle a wide range of issues, but most importantly, of course, the importance to promote it globally and worldwide. And that's, of course, an area of work that we've been driving, I think, for many, many years. But let me just begin by saying that, I mean, I'm delighted to be able to be here, even if only virtually because of the strike in Brussels, to launch this new report to help start, scale and sustain social innovation. And it draws, of course, as you said, Adriana, on a whole range of lessons that we've seen from the European Social Fund, and looking at the impact in particular. Now, this work marks a real significant step forward in expanding our collective knowledge and understanding of social innovation. And again, that's absolutely essential as to why we promote it. In particular, of course, by drawing on all of those lessons about how the ESF has contributed to development and this diversity of applications across Europe. But perhaps most importantly, one of the things it does also demonstrate is how important it can be in continuing, I think, and indeed shaping potentially future programming periods of the ESF. So I think those are some of the key messages I wanted to convey. Now, it provides a whole range of really important takeaways, and you'll see more about that in the next session. But perhaps the most salient, even if it's perhaps obvious to most people here today in the audience, that it's been gaining, I mean, real significant momentum and real significant traction. It's been transforming the way that governments, communities and stakeholders approach societal challenges. And without wishing to blow the OECD trumpet too loudly, you know, we, together, of course, with the Commission, who've been excellent partners throughout this journey, have played a pivotal role in making sure that we have that momentum. Since our very first formal definition of social innovation way back in 2000, we've continued to advance the understanding and increase the visibility of social innovation, ensuring that it's firmly embedded in the policy discourse. And only a few years ago, many of you will know that this culminated in the recommendation of the social and solidarity economy and social innovation, which was approved at our 2022 ministerial meeting of the OECD Council. And it's no coincidence, I guess, that we've seen an acceleration in momentum in recent years as countries face a number of real pressing challenges, and pressing challenges, of course, that social innovation can play a really important role in solving. I mean, challenges that are also set against the backdrop of stretched public finances, challenge of rising inequalities and basically these massive disparities that we see across different spaces, but also across different population groups, and of course challenges around the green transition. And these were just a few areas that social innovation, I think, can tackle. And we've seen, I think, those innovations take place, or at least those practices take place across a range of countries. France, for example, with its 2030 strategy, Estonia's Vision 2030 for social innovation, Germany's strategy for social innovation and social enterprises, Italy's strategy for inner areas, Portugal's social innovation initiative. I mean, there are many, many others. They've all recognized that social innovation is a critical and indispensable tool to drive sustainable, inclusive and resilient growth. And critically, and I think this is really an important point to make as well, act as an anchor to drive competitiveness, which of course is growing in importance everywhere. And I guess what makes social innovation so important, and you touched on this too, Andriana, is that it's not just its applicability across a wide range of sectors and policy spaces, for example, labour market integration, cohesion, regional development policy, but the fact that it adopts intrinsically this multi-stakeholder collaborative approach that brings together expertise from across a range of different fields. And I think that's what makes social innovation truly unique, radical, because of course it drives long-term social impact. It's embedded in its thought process. So it drives this notion of resilience, cohesion, a whole range of different areas that delivers on. And in our report, where we introduced this 3S framework, and I'm very glad to hear that it's landed very well with you too, Andriana, the start, the scale and the sustain, provides this practical guidance on how any country, region or local area can harness social innovation effectively. And it draws on this analysis of 96 ESF funded projects that look back over the last 2014-20 programming period, and it identified those three phases: the starting phase, which was the experimentation phase where we see new ideas tested and refined, the scaling phase, which is where we see this expansion of successful innovations, whether that's organically or through replication, the sustaining phase that embeds social innovations into long-term policies to ensure this enduring impact. And Karen will say a bit more about these in the following session, but I wanted perhaps just close with the really one critical and important message. And I think because social innovation leverages local knowledge, cultural practices and social networks and brings together this diverse range of stakeholders, it really builds resilient communities from the bottom up, and it helps that resilience at the local level adapt to rapid changes, whether those changes are because economic transformations or environmental pressures, social upheavals, and it reinforces this social cohesion and trust. And the reason that I mention that is because only last month we had a meeting of ministers responsible for regional development policy that we held in Warsaw with Poland as chairs. And that meeting recognized that entrenched regional inequalities and these geographies of discontent that we often refer to, not just because of the higher social costs that they bring, but because of this lost potential, go hand in hand with lower competitiveness. And so it was clear to everybody in the room that in order to fix the latter, which is poor competitiveness, we also need to fix the former, which is these geographies of discontent, these spatial inequalities. And it goes without saying, because of the way that social innovation is hardwired into local innovation systems, it has a real critical role to play in that space. And so it's an important tool not just to reduce inequalities, but also, I think, to drive competitiveness, but resilient competitiveness. So I'm going to just leave it there, because I think that there's an opportunity, I think, to hear more of these ideas bubble up, I think, during the conversation. But I wanted to conclude by saying that the OECD, of course, remains committed to supporting the Commission and, of course, member states and globally through our evidence-based work and our peer learning and practical country examples. Now, our goal ultimately is to help implement and start, scale and sustain social innovation. So thank you all. I look forward to an excellent discussion.
Great. So thank you so much again to Andriana Sukova and Nadim Ahmad for helping us to get the ball rolling here on the discussion. So just introduce myself. I'm Kira McGuire. I'm a head of division here in the OECD, and the work that we do on social innovation is part of our local employment and economic development program, and is really rooted in, as was said in the opening remarks, a bit the sort of local dimension where a lot of this begins. So we have, the opportunity to influence through European policies, national policies, but a lot of the work is really very local. So if we could get started on the presentation. And so just to clarify what you'll find in the report, so there is an overview of policies to promote social innovation, particularly at EU and national levels. So you can get a sense of that. And Nadim just mentioned a number of strategies that are described in the report. We have this framework that we'll go into in a little bit more detail on the start, scale, and sustain. And of course, some of the criteria of success depend on the connections between these three phases for social innovation. For each one, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the practical policy levers that are currently being used in the European space, but also beyond. But then there are some policy orientations that can be used to promote social innovation, perhaps even more. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then, as mentioned, the report also includes quite a few case studies from a number of member states, looking more in depth at how they did their social innovation and how they're managing their ESF funding approach. And just to flag also that when we talk about this, some of the programs that are evaluated, it was explicitly called social innovation, but in others, it was actually social innovation when you look at the actions that were being taken, even if it didn't have that label. And so, of course, the big question is, why do we care about social innovation? I mean, it's super important for so many aspects of our work, and it's really something that is trying to address a lot of what we may be wicked, very complicated social environmental challenges, where we really need to source the solutions across different sectors, across different stakeholders. And these are solutions that really generate social value. And they often are filling gaps where markets and governments might fall short. And as Nadim said, also the importance of this in helping to promote resilience in communities and perhaps catalyze systemic change. So we all know that there are some really important reasons why to promote it. And now we can look a little bit more at what are some success factors in promoting it. Slide, please. So as was mentioned in the opening remarks, we've been thinking about this and trying to promote this with OECD countries for 25 years to really see the importance of this. And of course, like technological innovation, you have changes to, products, processes, organizational changes, marketing approaches. But really for social innovation, we make this distinction both in EU policy and in OECD guidance on the fact that it's really about enhancing welfare, addressing unmet needs, and coming up with novel solutions. And those novel solutions can be new to the place. It doesn't have to always be new to the world, but the adaptation to where you're living is what is important. Next slide, please. So it was mentioned a number of different strategies where social innovation, for example, is embedded in an explicit strategy developed by the country, but also embedded in wider strategies. For example, the national strategy for inner areas in Italy, which is really trying to address those communities that are a bit less densely populated and in the middle of the country. In these inner areas, social innovation is seen as an opportunity to really support new growth and new forms of social inclusion. And we talked in the beginning, and Ms. Segova mentioned going beyond the EU space. And just to flag that, for example, in Canada, there are examples of really promoting also social innovation and how they are supporting social finance in order to fulfill those goals. So the report goes into a little bit more detail on many of these strategies, and some of them are actively using ESF funds, of course, to implement some of the programs that correspond to those strategies. Next slide. So I just wanted to make a point here that's also raised in the report that, especially when we're thinking about the importance of mainstreaming, that we can think of policies that both promote social innovation by increasing the demand or supply, but also the fact that the policy approach itself can be a social innovation. And so it's really very embedded in how we bring people together to find the solutions, how we often will use more human-centered design, co-design with a range of stakeholders. How do we experiment, provide evidence, and make this happen? So just wanted to flag that there are different approaches to thinking about social innovation and policy, and these are, two sets of types of approaches that I think are embedded in this START, scale, and sustain framework. Next slide, please. So, of course, and as was mentioned, this has become more prominent in European Social Fund programming. And so the reviews that we've looked at, we're pulling from the 2014 to 2020 period. But of course, in the current programming period, it has become more prominent, a priority, and also to help make sure that it's funded in a way that it encourages experimentation. Also, a very high EU co-financing rate, which is one of the success factors, I think, of part of the take up on social innovation is the understanding that risks can be taken, because one of the challenges, of course, is that it's always hard when doing calls to think about how to manage that risk. And I think this is also a very critical success factor. Next slide. So just to flag that as we did go through about 96 evaluations that the Commission shared with us to review for what kinds of social innovations to go into more detail, of course, a very large majority are in the employment space, followed by social inclusion and social and welfare services. So these are areas where a lot of the, of course, ESF plus currently fund priorities are focused on, but just also wanted to flag that with the context of that sample that was provided, over half of them they were at regional level, and actually about a third are at national level, and there were a couple that were a bit more sort of cross-border, transnational, or local. But I mentioned in the opening this sort of three frameworks. If you could just change the slide, please. Sort of starting, so really the focus on social innovation experiments, how to get those ideas sparked. Scaling, so helping to make sure that we are able to build on these successful social innovation solutions after learning from the sort of experimental phase. And then really long-term sustainability to ensure that these social innovations do have strong impacts over time. So what we're going to do is just quickly go through each one of these three phases. And then, of course, the panel discussion will also go into some of the challenges and opportunities and solutions in addressing each one of these. So first, in terms of starting, we see a lot of existing practices, funding for social experiments, different labs and innovators for social innovation, competitive competitions and awards for different new social innovations, even R&D programs, and also collaborative platforms that bring folks together to support social innovation. A few opportunities for the future that are described in the report talk a bit about how to identify potential blind spots. And this could involve both particular places that are often neglected in policy, or where their specific conditions make it harder to address the social challenge, but also the types of stakeholders. And that's why I think one of the, the recommendations is really looking at how to better engage different types of stakeholders. And I think to pick up on this point of, how do we get the long-term sustainability, linking up with the public authorities that do have the capacity to help scale these things up right from the beginning is also extremely important. And then, of course, there are some recommendations also just in terms of the way that some of the, preparatory grants or timeliness of payments can help with some of these social innovations in the way that the current funding is administered. And there are also more opportunities to, we think, connect social incubators. And I know there are a lot of different communities of practice out there that are helping, in a sense, to support that. In terms of some good practices in this area, in terms of, for example, connecting social incubators, the report just wanted to flag, for example, some activities in the Slovak Republic and the way that they helped to develop some strong linkages and cooperation and knowledge exchange. Or, for example, in Germany, with some very innovative approaches to reducing apprenticeship dropouts in geriatric care. And of course, this is going to be a big challenge for our societies and how to manage that, and making sure that these kinds of jobs are attractive to people, because there'll be massive labor demand needs, and some very interesting activities in this example with respect to how they brought in such a wide range of actors, and also how they address not only the pedagogy but also the social needs of the people that are in the apprenticeships, to kind of help make sure that they continue on. In the next phase, just wanted to flag, of course, we have the scaling phase. And this phase is really an opportunity to kind of replicate successful initiatives at a larger scale. And so we see, of course, that there are many different activities and specific programs to scale up, and many of those are involving access to finance, or some sort of capacity building, or some sort of transnational cooperation. And I think what we found in the areas for perhaps further pursuit are, different opportunities to support further internationalization and sharing of ideas. We actually have a report on internationalization and social economy, and it's a very different type of approach of internationalization to what we think about in a traditional firm. And so this learning from other international examples is, of course, extremely valuable for people to listen and then adapt to their local context. Of course, another area maybe just to highlight is impact measurement, because this is an area where, if we're able to document the positive impacts of social innovation, it has a positive reinforcement in terms of promoting its ability to scale, attract other partners, attract financing, and of course, lots of opportunities to work on the social innovation ecosystem more generally in a place, which also helps then organically support more scaling. And a couple just of quick examples there just to flag, and we'll hear a little bit more in the panel from Portugal, where they had used social impact bonds and different partnerships for impact that were able to sort of link funding to measurable social outcomes, which is an inspiration and ability to attract attention and scale. And then another example that we have in the report just on Italy and some of the efforts that they have done to support women's integration into the labor market and some of the challenges there, but that were very adapted to the different regions. And so kind of a network of regions that was able to share, but also adapt to their local circumstances. And finally, in terms of sustaining the social innovation impact over time, and this, of course, is linked with the scaling phase. One of the things, of course, is enabling policy and legal frameworks that are going to be helpful in creating an environment where these social innovations can be picked up. There's also, of course, socially responsible procurement.
شفت له لو تكست وديكشي حتى ما عرفتش واش
Yes, if somebody mute the colleague that yeah, thank you so much. So another area that comes up quite a lot is socially responsible procurement, and I know the EU has guidance on that, and the OECD has a report on that, and this is something that is particularly interesting to see how we can continue to further understand how we can sort of marry the two worlds between procurement, which has very particular rules and is risk averse, with the sort of experimental nature of social innovation, but by the time we get to this phase, hopefully they've proven the value of the concept and something that merits being engaged in procurement. And of course, institutionalization of these social innovations through public policy is something that is what we think should be thought of as well in some of the earlier phases, because the sort of engagement with those that really can help scale up is going to be very important. So a couple of the policy orientations that we had seen in terms of its ability to be successful in scaling up So one is really involving sort of local stakeholders in helping to do the ongoing management over time as well, in addition to the complementary actions done at higher levels, but also making the link between what is the social innovation and what are some of the other policy priorities that are important in different national, regional, and local strategies. For example, the twin transition or social cohesion. And I think, Nada mentioned a little bit the importance of this is in his remarks as well. So just to flag, the report also includes a number of case studies that are looking at these projects I think on the good practices, one that we wanted to flag was municipalities, and here there's an example from France in the Espace Métier Aquitaine project, where really had an opportunity for all of the places within this network to get engaged. And then a very interesting Interreg project that was very helpful in the sort of transnational cooperation and linking up social innovation to sort of broader goals, for example, the green and digital transition to improve impact. So at the end of the report, you'll also see more detail on some of the examples and the types of projects that have been studied, but also, as was mentioned, a little bit more on the sort of practical approaches to how some of these funds are being managed overall. So without further ado, I'd like to just close out here and just flag that there are some other reports also the colleagues can share in the chat, and of course others, please feel free to share in the chat, share in the chat as well, the different policies that you have and approaches to support social innovation. We have a couple, for example, of reports that we think might be interesting in looking at the ecosystems for social innovation, as well as the particular challenges in rural areas to support social innovation. So I'm going to sort of stop here, and hopefully you'll get a chance to check out the report that's being released and learn from the different examples and exchange with each other to learn from that. So I think now we're going to transition over to the panel discussion, and so I'd just like to call to the virtual stage our different participating panelists. If we can show on the screen the different colleagues here. So we have Ruth Passerman, who is a director within the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion of the Commission. We have Felipe Almeida, who is the president of Portugal Social Innovation, and we have a lot of different projects that are featured in the report from these initiatives. We have Armelle Ledon, who is a European Affairs consultant and has worked a lot on sort of these communities of practice looking at social innovation. And we also have Patricia Saroglia, who is the head of the public policy and Social Innovation Unit at the Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini in Italy. So welcome all four of you to the stage, and just to share, so we're going to have a couple rounds of questions to our panelists, and then of course there's opportunities to put in the chat questions, and don't hesitate, colleagues, if you really like the questions, to upvote them, and then we'll try and get those then, of course, towards the end of the discussion. So maybe if we could start with you, Ruth, a little bit, because you have helped oversee as well a shift in sort of ESF programming in the current ESF Plus format, and how social innovation has become a bit more prominent in the programming. And as we said, that actually has quite an important co-financing rate for member states. And I'm just wondering if maybe, Ruth, you want to jump in and take a little bit about what some of the learnings you have from prior programming periods and maybe early insights from the current programming period, and in particular about the sort of top levers that you're seeing to promote social innovation within ESF. So Ruth, if you want to jump in on those points.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me well. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Good. All right. So I continue. Thank you very much for the report and indeed, and for the question. Now, I guess the first thing I should mention is the first lever, if you want, that I should mention is the design itself of the European Social Fund, which is based basically on regional programs. I mean, some national, but also some regional programs. So it is very much rooted and it is done, also elaborated in a partnership mode, consulting social partners, national non-governmental agencies, the local civil society, and that allows, I think, to identify on the ground what are the problems that people want to would like to work on. Now, as you rightly mentioned, I noted your slide about the programming 1420 and the programming 2127. Programming 1420 had less of an accent on social innovation and also overall more of an accent on employment, while the 2127 has really put a very strong focus on social innovation. And also overall the program has actually more on social inclusion and sort of more social aspects, and rather than focusing on employment. I mean, not only, but it was clearly more of an issue also in the period 1420, to be honest. I mean, if you think it was programmed, it was thought during the financial crisis, the key point was clearly rather the aftermath of the financial crisis, the key problem was clearly unemployment in Europe. While now I think we have more, it's not that unemployment has disappeared, but now we have I think we have had a greater sensitivity to broader social problems. Okay, sorry, that was an aside. But just to say that we have put in this programming period 21-27 much more attention on the issue of social innovation, and in particular, like you also mentioned, the Article 14 of the social ESF regulation specifically obliges member states to invest in social innovation, and moreover with a very high co-financing rate, which is also an incentive, and that has led actually to 2 billion invested in social innovation in this current period. So we're hoping that we will be, things are of course only on their way now, so we don't yet have the results of this, but we hope it will bring lots of ideas to the ground. And one of the important ways we do bring these ideas at the ground is through the what I would call the third very important lever, branded as the Social Innovation Initiative, and it's basically something that we're doing. Two strands, I would say, are the important part. One is what we call communities of practice, which is exactly addressing what you mentioned about the learning from each other and how also the theory can be brought on the ground in practice. It is communities with experts from the member states and from the managing authorities on various areas, of which social innovation, but the others are employment and skills and the social inclusion, migration. So all of these allow discussion and learning between the authorities in the member states. I think that's very important. And then the Social Innovation Initiative has also a strand of calls for proposals. Now, we've always had calls for proposals, and they would be in what you would call the first S, scope. But what we found out during the period 2014-2020 is that we were missing the second S, the scaling. And that is why we have this new calls, which are specifically, the idea would be that they're about identifying good practices and good innovations that have been found from the ground in the first phase, but not necessarily only from the social, not only from financing from the social fund, but in general, any good social innovation, and to see if it can be scaled or transferred. So these, I think, altogether creates an ecosystem, if you want to call it like that, but anyway, a structure which allows to push and improve the take-up of social innovation in Europe. I hope I was clear.
Yes, no, thank you so much. And also just helping to flag for everybody a little bit the sort of changing approach from programming period to programming period. And so people can get a sense also. But again, what's really interesting is just to flag that social innovations were taking place, but they didn't necessarily call it that. And I think now with the label, it's actually helping to really increase its visibility and take up, which is wonderful. Felipe, maybe I call you to the stage a little bit here, because you've been leading Portugal Social innovation for over a decade, and you have quite a lot of activities, and many of them using ESF funding, and lots of different instruments in terms of capacity building, partnerships for impact, social impact bonds, social innovation funds. So quite a lot of different examples and quite a scale of resources that you've made available to support social innovation. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how Portugal Social Innovation works, and some of the financing tools that you've been using, and how you've been able to manage some of the potential challenges in terms of supporting social innovation, because you've had over a decade of experience in this, and might have some suggestions on where you saw challenges and how you got to the solutions.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure and an honor to share this special moment with all of you. And congratulations to the European Commission and the OECD, to you, Karen, to Amal Chakro and the brilliant team for this timely report that I'm sure it will be an inspiration far beyond its main purpose, which is to review how the European Social Fund has helped to shape the social innovation agenda across European countries. And Portugal Social Innovation, as you said, is one of those success stories. It is a Portuguese government initiative created more than 10 years ago, with two interconnected goals by that time. And they still are the same in this programming period. On one hand, to promote social innovation, which means to use European funds to finance social experimentation. And on the other hand, to develop the social investment market, as we called it by that time, which means to bring into this process social investors, private and public, that could co-finance this project and enhance the possibility of success, but also with the contact of these entrepreneurial processes to help to evolve their investment paradigms as well. So the idea was to make these connections so that ultimately it could help to inspire also the evolution of public policies addressing the most pressing social challenges. So these were the main ideas. And of course, the opportunity with the European funds made it possible. And to achieve these goals, we've created, as you said, in the previous programming period, 4 financing instruments with 2 basic assumptions. The first assumption is that each of these financing instruments addresses different financing needs of social innovation projects in different stages of their development, of their maturity. So that's why we have several instruments and not just one. We've created a capacity building to develop management skills in these organizations, then a grant-based match fund, which has been quite successful, and then an outcome payment instrument, which is the social impact bonds, as you said, and even a financial instrument with the European Social Fund, a very innovative financial instrument with the European Social Fund, with two streams, a debt stream that provides guarantees for loans, and an equity stream that co-invests alongside with private investors in equity of SMEs that have social innovation projects. So the idea was to offer this different set of instruments to address different financing needs and different potentials for impact of social innovation projects. And this is the first assumption, different instruments for different stages of development to create pipeline in the ecosystem. And the second assumption, in all of these instruments, there is a seat at the table for what we call the social investor, which is the private or public organization that co-funds these projects alongside with the European Social Fund that we've mobilized. And in the previous programming period, we have approved 698 social innovation projects developed by 481 organizations from all sectors, but mainly from the social economy sector, around 90%. And all of these organizations and projects were co-funded alongside with 848 investors from all sectors as well, the biggest foundations. Most of these organizations are business corporations, but also more than half of the Portuguese municipalities that decided to co-fund these projects as well and became key strategic partners to develop the social innovation ecosystem across the country. And concerning the challenges, what were the main challenges that we faced 10 years ago? And some of them are ongoing challenges. Well, first of all, to design innovative financing solutions under the restrictions and limitations imposed by the European and national regulation. And on that sense, also sometimes the heavy administrative burden for small and inexperienced social startups that are creative, innovative, they provide impact, but they have no experience in dealing with all these requirements. So this was a challenge on the administrative part and also to design the instruments. But we did it, and we have 5 new instruments now in this programming period on top of the 4 that we designed 10 years ago. Second challenge, the low awareness and misunderstandings and the lack of consensus about the concept of social innovation. It's still a challenge that we face, trying to simplify as much as possible the narrative and the language. Also, we found some resistance from more mainstream social organizations to understand the narrative of social innovation. 10 years ago, we no longer feel that resistance as much as it was, but it was some reason. There was some resistance, mainly because these organizations, they are the real specialists on the ground on most of the pressing social challenges that we want to solve with social innovation, but they lacked management skills and this narrative. So we try to overcome this, being as close as possible to these organizations. We also found quite challenging to mobilize private investors, which is predictable, and also the absence of a strong and technically sound ecosystem of intermediaries and consultants was a challenge in the beginning. And on top of all, the unprepared public administration, public policies to follow up closely and embed innovation. So these were, I would say, most of the challenges that we faced in the beginning. How did we overcome this? Some of them are ongoing challenges, as I said, but mainly simplifying as much as possible the language and the narrative, having the right instruments, be as close as possible to all stakeholders on the ground, investors, municipalities, entrepreneurs, social organizations, public administration at a local level or central level, and develop trusty relationships, because it's not just about money. If you want to develop a social innovation ecosystem, you have to build trust on top of the resources that you have and make bridges among these organizations, and also hear the entrepreneurs, their needs and their wishes, their visions. So I would say that these were, and of course, we formalized this, creating a national advisory board with around 40 organizations, leading organizations from all sectors, that can, on that advisory board, talk to each other, know each other, create bridges, understand the challenges, and most of all, help us to understand what should be the priorities to develop this national ecosystem. So basically, that's what we did in the last 10 years. And that's how we came to now have, in this new programming period, a whole new phase for Portugal social innovation.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Felipe. Maybe we can go into in the next round a little bit more in detail on some of the successes from that pool. I think you said of 688 projects. So we'll look forward to learning about that as well in a few moments. And thank you again for also highlighting some of the ways that you overcame these challenges, and also just reminding us that innovation is about disruption. And so we have to keep that in mind and try and figure out how to make sure that these positive disruptions are well received. Again, I think very interesting, the trust element that you raised as a critical part, because a lot of this is about working together across lots of stakeholders and sectors. So your trust point is very, very well taken. Armel, maybe you could join the discussion here, because as a lead thematic expert in the ESF Plus community of practice on social innovation, you have an opportunity to really facilitate a lot of the knowledge sharing and helping to build capacity really across Europe. And I know you do a lot of different sort of events and activities to support, some of the phases of social innovation efforts. So would you be able to share a little bit on what you think are sort of the top 3 approaches to make sure that these programming outputs and these efforts for social innovation can really inform policy design and practice? Look forward to your thoughts on that. Can you hear me, Armel?
Armelle, can you unmute yourself, please?
Let's see. Armelle, are you able to join in? If not, we can jump to Patricia and have you join in and check your technical challenge there. Okay, I guess we'll get back to Armelle in a couple of moments then. Why don't we jump to you, Patricia, because you're head of public policy and social innovation unit at the Fondazione Giacomo Brodellini, and you're director of the Italian National Competence Center for Social Innovation. So you've really looked a lot at how to kind of... Armelle, you're able to jump in?
I don't know.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So, Patricia, we'll put you on hold for 1 second. We'll make sure Armelle gets in there. I think glad things worked out technically. Technological innovation has to accompany our social innovations as well. So that's always for all of us. So just to, maybe Armelle, if you could talk a little bit about, some of the sort of top mechanisms that you've seen to help with social innovation policy design and practice, because you're helping to sort of animate and be a thematic expert in this community of practice that we heard about also earlier on social innovation and ESF+.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Apologies. That is a good introduction. Sorry, Patricia, for the delay. So thank you for the invitation, and straight to the point. Indeed, I lead this community of practice that basically aims to help ESF managing authorities and national competence centers to exchange on social innovation, to share, and this is based on mutual learning. So it's a big community, it's very helpful, and we all learn a lot, including me. So I'm going to try to share what I got from this experience and previous ones working for ESF and social innovation. The question is broad, but maybe I'd like to focus first on the impact on policy. You were talking about policy design, and I think that's still the weak element in the social innovation process. For many reasons, social innovation flourished. I mean, we have tons of examples and successful projects all over Europe and beyond. What is still missing is the connection and the impact on the policy. To me, we just had a survey across within the COP. There's someone who is
could the back office, could you help the person who is speaking?
Okay, all the microphones are mute, so Armelle, you need just to unmute yourself now, please.
Is it okay?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. As it was stressed by Felipe, by Ruth, there's still a lack of understanding of social innovation and the value of social innovation. It's still a bit of a niche, a confidential field, and that is indeed a very big obstacle. I'd like to recall that social innovation is both a process and a result, and it's important because social innovation applies to any sector and any field. And I really like your graphic and the fact that you stress that social innovation that policy is for and as social innovation, and we tend to focus more on the for regulation, funding, etc. Policy for social innovation is really how you use these approaches, methods of social innovation to find new solutions where we have burning social challenges in employment, in education and skills, in migration, in energy poverty, all the challenges that we know. So that requires a cross-sectoral approach, really. And we see, you showed in some countries, we have some national strategies on social innovation. However, they are still sometimes a bit disconnected from the funding, notably the ESF plus funding, which of course limits the impact of this funding. And another example about the need for cross-sectoral approach, if you have a complex challenge, let's take homelessness, housing first, you need to have different ministries on the table. Housing, health policies. We saw an example in the Czech Republic where they use it in the Ministry of Justice. So just to recall that it's really important for all the policies. Also, if you want to have an impact, choose the right level. We tend to think always of the national policy impact, but it all depends on the responsibilities and competencies. And you mentioned very rightly the local and the regional level. Depending on what you want to achieve, involve the policymakers at the right level and involve them from the very beginning. We all say that, but how to do it concretely? We saw, for instance, a really good example in Poland where they have incubators in different regions. They have specific policy focus, each incubator, and these policy focuses are defined with the policy level, with the different ministries. So they identify challenges at the beginning and decide that they're going to put the money on these challenges that they have prioritized. The last thing maybe I'd like to say is that you need to, if you want to have policymakers on board, and I'm sure Felipe could confirm this, you have to convince them. So of course you've got social impact assessment and evidence, right? Or you have to have them on board quickly. You have to convince them quickly. Have a look at their policy agenda. Don't try to go completely at the opposite. However, you also have a role as a social innovator to maybe unveil some challenges that are not seen by policymakers. And we saw some very interesting foresight methods to anticipate on what they call silent social bombs in the Czech Republic. So map and try to see what is going to explode, which today is silent. And these are really, really, really nice. And I would like to just finish by saying that you can't expect one single project to have an impact at policy level. It's very rare. Then we tend to really promote an approach that we call portfolio approach, where you have to tackle one specific challenge, different projects working, trying to find social solutions. And if you make them work together and analyze their results, you might have a chance to have a bigger impact at policy level. So in summary, go also from curative to more preventive and even transformative approach by involving policymakers. And on the practice, I think I will go maybe in the second round to give the floor to the other speakers.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Armelle. And, you know, and I think we talked a little bit about blind spots as we're thinking about social innovation, but your term, I guess the term they used, silent social bombs is an even more powerful way of describing how to make sure that we think a bit in advance, use that foresight and identify some areas that come back and cause challenges in the future. So very interesting also. And I think your point about process. Yeah.
Copyright.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Armelle.
No, sorry. Because we were all very, very, very interested by these social time bombs. And I was saying copyright for the Czech Republic Managing Authority and National Competence Center that comes from them.
Great. No, it's a really interesting example. And I think it was raised also in the opening remarks. We need to think about how social innovation can address challenges such that we don't have these sort of social time bombs ticking in the background. I think now, Patricia, if we could turn to you, because in your role, you've been really leading up competence in centers for social innovation. You lead up social innovation at a foundation. And could you tell us a little bit in particular about your work and also how Italy's National Competence Center is really connecting public authorities and social innovators and, you know, some of the issues that you've seen in terms of trying to also convince maybe these more traditional stakeholders to get engaged with social innovators?
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. What can say is agree with the previous speakers that social innovation is misunderstood, or not all the actors, especially policy administration at the national or regional government, are not so aware on what social innovation is, how it works, and which is the added value that can bring to the table. And also because social innovation, as we know, is characterized by high degree of uncertainty and complexity. And but we cannot eliminate this uncertainty because this is a structural condition of social innovation. But what must be done is to manage and govern this uncertainty in order to make what is unknown known and what is growing in the fog clear and familiar. In our direct experiences as Fondazione Brodolini, managing innovation hubs across Italy and managing different social innovation projects, effective management of social innovation certainty starts on recognizing it as a multidimensional, place-based and network-driven process, and so it also diminishes when clear proof are added to social values is shown, when ideas are tested through small, safe pilots, when a common shared language is built because each actor speaks different language and their priorities differs. And this point is often not taken so in consideration, but in the arena is multi-actors, and the negotiation among them, among the actors, introduce technical, political, relational uncertainty. And so it diminishes also when rely on social economy actors, then blend entrepreneurial discipline with social purpose. When a common ground is built and also trust is built. So overcoming these obstacles requires a systemic approach that blends multidimensional skills, capacity building, collaborative governance models. And this is a cultural shift that also needs supporting relational infrastructures. And that is where the national competence centers come in. As the Italian competence centers, I'm at serve as a policy-driven facilitator and a relational infrastructure to make social innovation known, adopted, and scaled, and also sustained in a long-term period. We see ourselves as a bridge between public policies and innovative social practices, and it's in our mission to try to diminish the uncertainty that characterizes social innovations, promoting systemic multidisciplinary. It's impossible for me to say multidisciplinary and collaborative approach to design impact-oriented policies. And I give you a practical example. Maybe I'm more clear on what we are trying to do as a national competence center. It is a new reality in Italy, so we have to gain also recognitions among our stakeholders. In Italia, ecosystem of social innovation is very active, it's mature, and cities are very engaged in social innovation. Regions are still asking which is the real value. They are involved, of course, but we need to open a continuous dialogue with them. We are endorsed by our national, our Ministry of Labor and Social Policies, but we have to build again, a continuous dialogue with them in order to help them to really understand what social innovation is, works, and what social innovation is not. And it's the example coming from a pilot that we have the opportunity to do with the managing authority of the Metro Plus and Southern Medium City program in this programming period. That is an innovative program in different ways. It's the first time that targets medium-sized cities, 50 inhabitants, 50, 70, 100 inhabitants, then prioritize social innovation because it's a measure that focuses explicitly on social innovations, blends ERDF and ESF plus funds, and also requires for the first time that each city that selected, there are 39, have to make their proposal co-designing the project that they will submit. That's a very innovative. And as a competence center, we supported the managing authority, helping them to draft a guideline on social innovation and running capacity building for directly for the cities. And the capacity building familiarized participant what the tools that typically used in social innovation processes, like stakeholder engagement, co-design, peer learning, human-centered service design, and so on. And also try to listen and understand which are the needs and the worries that the city have in try to experiment social innovation for the first time. And so having this discussion, having this safe place where to start thinking in a different way, gave city the opportunity to see how social innovation works practically, and offer the opportunity to open silos and offering tools for thinking across multiple funds, encouraging multi-sector partnership, participatory process, and avoiding duplication, and ensure resources are well properly allocated. So in this way, participants appreciate also that we try to build a dialogue and connect them with the managing authorities, peers from other cities, and across departments of this city. And so they also welcomed as an hands-on methodology and concrete best practices case, which made the learning immediately usable and rooted in their everyday work. So this is a way that allowed us to try to start diminishes uncertainty in the public administrations, and also to build a dialogue between public and private sectors involving in social economy actors in the process, and start using more, which is called in Italy shared administration model. I don't know if quite clear.
No, I think that's really helpful, Patricia. And I see already in the comments people noting good points there. So, so I know folks are actively listening, and I think some of you made about shared language and relational infrastructure as well, I think are very interesting to talk about how to get people to understand what it is they can do, and for those that are maybe a little bit unsure, have greater uncertainty, get a little bit more comfortable. And I think that picks up also what Felipe said also about the trust across different stakeholders within the system. So we're hearing some sort of common good framework conditions to help promote social innovation. So we're going to go to the next round of questions to our panelists, and then we'll have the questions. And I know that colleagues have been putting several in the chat, and so our panelists are being primed to try and answer some of those questions that you've started to ask in the chat. Before we go to the questions, just in a second round with maybe, you know, just some quick answers from your side, we wanted to look a little bit on the different phases of the sort of start, scale, and sustain. So maybe going back to you, Armelle, on the start part of the sort of framework, this 3S framework that we describe in the report, and, you know, within the sort of work that you're doing, there are different tools to help kind of promote this. Would you be able to talk a little bit about how we can address some of the particular challenges, such as risk sharing and early stage adaptation? Because in this start phase, there are still some challenges, even if the mainstreaming and sustaining is becoming a big issue. But maybe you could focus a little bit on the start pillar of the framework and what you're seeing there.
Thank you. Let's start with the start. There are a few myths I'd like to kill, actually, which, for instance, is that any organization can innovate. Again, I'm going back to it's not a field for specialists. And this is important because here we're talking about the start, which means that small organizations from anywhere across the EU territory and with any status. There were some questions about social economy, fertile ground for social innovation, but you also have social innovation led by civil society, NGOs, public sector. So just to clarify this, which means that there are already loads of social innovation. How can we better help them start in good conditions? In fact, I think it's more as the question. One thing which is underestimated very often is a well-targeted communication. If you want to get out of your comfort zone and avoid working always with the usual suspects, then to really go for social innovation and social experimentation, if you have a call that aims to address migrants' integration in the labor market, or a call that means to address energy poverty, you're not going to communicate your call and disseminate the information to the same people. This sounds very basic, but it is actually very often underestimated. So give a chance to all those who actually can bring new solutions and are not under your radar. The second thing is social innovation is by definition a collaborative process. So creating spaces and conditions for people to collaborate, to collectively identify the needs they want to address jointly is also a very important condition. Includes the end users. Social innovation is a user-centric approach. With the best intention, you might miss the target if you don't involve those who are really concerned. And of course, we said it involved the policymakers. In terms of resources, I mean, many things were mentioned in your report. Of course, competitions give some visibility. Collaborative platforms are very useful because if you don't start from scratch, use the existing experience already and try to adapt it, at least partially, to your own context. You will save time and you will be more efficient. Skills and support to project promoters, especially if you want to have newcomers. And I saw that in many countries, more and more they try to support before, during, and after the calls. And it's really important. Design calls in a more user-friendly manner. Trying to delete all the buzzwords and concepts that scare people. Make it easy. And maybe another thing that we saw, which is really interesting, we talk here about the start. So you start small because you're taking risk and you don't know if it's going to work or not. So you've got social experimentation and social innovation, small scale. If you go small, what you can do as an investor or a policymaker to avoid investing all your money right from the beginning is to design two-step processes. First, you finance the prototyping and ideation step. And if it's working okay, you go for development and even scaling after that. This is also more freedom for the project promoters because they have the right to fail. They have, more importantly, the right to test and to experiment. And if it does not go well, it's a lesson. They will not develop, they will go back and rework and adjust. And maybe also to start well, some labs and incubators should focus maybe more on this very first Lego brick, which is really at the stage of the idea. Very often they start at the stage where the idea is already a bit well designed and all that. Okay, it's easy. Help people collectively, not only one person, but in a territory or in a sector, to think about solutions that could really solve their problems. And money, if you have small organizations, don't wait. They don't have the treasury. They can't wait for long. So pre-finance, we have examples in some countries, they give 100% of the grants right at the beginning. Not everybody does that, but it proves it's possible. And there would be loads of things to say, but to me, it's really more to create the right conditions for social innovation to emerge than to really throw big monies and expect something to happen. So it's really support, help, provide skill, equip, and give the space for people to connect. Things will happen.
Thank you so much, Armelle, and I think. Oops, and I think that some of the issues you raised about making this as user-friendly as possible, so that we don't get caught up in definitions all the time, but we really focus on exactly what we're trying to achieve, and the process is very important there. And I think you mentioned grants for prototypes and smaller amounts and things like that. And I think that's in the report we try to highlight a little bit some of these issues on payment timing and preparatory grants that could help with sort of fitting in with some of the suggestions that you just made. I think that they're very well aligned. I think now if we go to the scale part, Ruth, if we could bring you back in here, because a lot of ESF activities are also about scaling and of course with a goal to sustain. And I'm just wondering if you might want to tell us a little bit about some of the different tools that are in ESF Plus, because I know there's growth financing, transnational cooperation, there's impact measurement, and sort of other activities. So if you could talk to us a little bit about these levers for scale that you've seen and your experiences with those.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, the first, what we have seen, so for the moment, we are, as I said, what we're trying to do now as much as possible is the sort of learning between different experiences and also at transnational level, and to and also identify which are the key aspects for success so that projects can be taken up within the framework of the European Social Fund by other countries or regions. And I think this is very important. So it's very important also to identify the key points for success, like Armelle has done, and some of them are easy to do and others a bit more difficult. I know that in general, accessing the European funds is not the simplest of the things that exist, because it's public money at European level. Every cent has to be accounted for, and therefore it is not the right instrument to finance experimentation, where obviously there is also a risk of failure. So that is something where we are trying to, we have, I think, in this programming period, tried to address, also with more using InvestEU, which is, so a lot of the social economy financing, microfinance is coming via the InvestEU program, and there is more demand-led and has perhaps a better and more possibility to have innovative approaches. But for the future, we think that these two things will be more connected. In any case, in the future budget, there's going to be less money overall at the EU level, and therefore we need to use more financial instruments as opposed to grants. But I think that will also help. In a way, it will also help financing innovative projects, actually, I think, because one of the, also as has been already mentioned by someone, there is an issue of getting mainstream actors to agree to the innovative approaches, and mainstream actors are, of course, those that have typically the access to the ESF funds. So to focus for the future, we will definitely focus a lot on implementing the European Pillar of Social Rights, and in particular its targets. So that is raising employment rate. We're nearly there, actually. Reducing the level of poverty, we're very far away, and improving the skills level of adults, and we're very far away. So so that perhaps gives an indication of the areas where we think we will be focusing in the future. And of course we'll also be very working on the issue of territorial cohesion in general, so addressing the communities that are more isolated or at risk of depopulation or face particular challenges. For example, for example, the regions which border with Russia, Ukraine, etc. And the other thing where I want, because I started talking about InvestEU, because InvestEU, we are also financing interesting projects on impact measurement and impact investment, which I think can actually then be are part of the things which can be transferred in a way afterwards in the general program. So to answer perhaps at the same, I don't know if I've answered, but there is a question of what will happen in the future in the timeline. So I thought I might as well address that immediately, because basically we think we're going to do more of the same of what we're doing now. But as I said, with more more probably loans or debt financing and things like that, rather than grants, which I think actually will be in a way helping to have new things emerge. Hello?
I think it was my computer that froze, but I'm on the connected to our network here. So sorry about that, Ruth. It was just for a couple seconds that I was out. But I think very helpful that you gave some hints about the future, because I know we can't talk about all of the things in the ESF programming for the next round, but I think it was very helpful that you gave some of the hints about where the general direction is, so people can sort of think about how to anticipate and design a little bit their thinking based on the sort of parameters of the next programming period, but also to remind them that they can also contribute with their own resources with the grants, and so that this is something that it's not entirely ESF funded. Of course, for countries, they can, and regions and cities, they can also have their own activities and capitalize also on ESF. So I think that combination of different types of financing will be very important. And speaking of financing, because I know Felipe, you talk in your work with Portugal Social Innovation, you have a lot of different elements that are really looking at the financing for sustainability of these social innovations and how to get the most out of them. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experiences with institutionalization, procurement, and how for example, Portugal's use of the social impact bonds and these mission-driven structures and intermediaries, how they're helping to support the sort of sustaining pillar of social innovation.
Okay, thank you, Karen. But first, let me just say that to address and highlight a very important point that was raised by Armel If we add the projects that we approved in the previous programming period and the more than 400 we already approved in this one, we have approved in Portugal more than 1.1 thousand projects, social innovation projects. It represents around 185 million euros of European funds plus 70 million euros of social investment, which is for a small country of 10 million people is quite remarkable. And from our experience, I fully agree with Armel when Armel says that social innovation can actually be developed by any kind of organization. We are funding, of course, social economy organizations, associations, cooperatives, charities, but also organizations that come from the for-profit sector, of course, small business enterprises, and even universities. Dozens of universities are developing applied research with cross-sector partnerships, and this can be a cradle of social innovation as well. So we became, after the first 30 million euros directed only for social economy organizations, we became agnostic concerning the nature of the organization that can be cradle of social innovation, and that was one of the key elements for the success. And I'd like to also highlight that when we talk about innovation, we have to admit, as Ruth said, failure. Failure is part of the innovation process. And when we talk about social innovation, it's even more demanding because in most of the cases, we cannot see the impacts that we desire immediately. So we have to wait a long time for those impacts. So if we have, and our source of funding, public funds and European funds are quite conservative. So every euro has to be well spent. What does it mean to be well spent when you talk about social innovation? So our effort, we go a step back, and our effort is on the selection process in the beginning. And when we talk about social innovation, we also made a step back. And I think this is quite, it can be surprising, but the focus of social innovation, from our perspective, is not on the innovation part. The innovation is a requirement. It can be disruptive, as you said, Karen, but also incremental. We equally value incremental innovation on top of solutions that already exist. But the focus is not on the innovation. It's on the problem that the innovation wants to address. And that is important because we are making a huge effort, and we've been doing that, to make sure that all the projects that we approve are addressing real problems on the ground. So all the beneficiaries have to demonstrate that the problem exists and that they are somehow specialists on that challenge, and make cross validations as much as possible as well. So when we talk about sustainability, what are the levers that we developed concerning the sustainability of the impact, not the sustainability of the organization, because the focus is on the problem. So institutionalization and so forth. First of all, we have specific financing instruments, blended financing instruments. This is one of the main drivers. We mix both European funds with private funds from several dozens, hundreds of organizations that then became partners of the entrepreneurs and social organizations. Some of these organizations develop a strong partnership, they evolve in their strategies, and they can actually grow through the support, with the support of these social investors. So the first thing is to have blended finance instruments that can mix these different sources of funding to create new partnerships that can endure the projects. Then we also became key partners on the other way. The municipalities became key partners of the national public policy. This is quite important. We opened up the possibility of these investors to be public institutions, and that allowed us to knock on the doors of the Portuguese municipalities and challenge them to look at social innovation as a driver of local development. And more than half of the Portuguese municipalities are funding these projects. We are working very closely with dozens of them. And it means that this is a link to local public policy. This is how we can endure social innovation at a local and regional level, bringing municipalities and local governments to the stage and being leaders of this process. We also use in the social impact bonds, as you said, the validation of public administration, high-level public administration, the public institutions that are responsible for executing public policy in different areas, employment, social protection, justice, education, in health. These organizations have to validate the projects, make sure that they are aligned with public policy priority. They follow up very closely these projects. No skin in the game yet because we are using European funds, but they are the future outcome payers for these projects. So they are learning what is social innovation alongside with us, following these projects up closely. So the validation from public administration is a way to bring them as close as possible as well. We are also investing in capacity building. We made it impact management and measurement, the impact management mandatory for all projects in Portugal. From the beginning, not at the end, in the beginning, we are funding what we call impact managers inside the teams that develop social innovation. And this is a key issue to make social innovation more visible and with more capacity to flourish. And we are also funding social innovation incubators, specific social innovation incubators, these structures that provide capacity building and networking for entrepreneurs at the local and regional level. We have 38 social innovation incubators already in the new programming period, 35 approved in the previous one, but that was an experience. Now we have a specific instrument just for social innovation incubators. And these are structures that on the ground are developing at the local and regional level social entrepreneurship ecosystems, usually in a very close relationship with the municipalities as well, and with the private investors that have on different grounds. So I would like to just to highlight also one thing, the use of European Social Fund. One of the main advantages, besides of course the possibility of creating this national public policy in Portugal, is that it allowed us to align the strategy with a long-term vision beyond the internal political cycle. And this is a huge advantage of using European funds. We are able to define a more long-term program despite the fluctuations of the internal political cycle. And that was quite an advantage. One of the key success factors in Portugal was also the creation of a public agency with a specific mandate to manage the funds and to become the main catalyzer of the whole ecosystem, a hub where everyone knows where to knock when they want to talk about social innovation, entrepreneurs, public administration, public policies, investors, municipalities. So this hub was critical from the beginning. It's not diluted in other institutions. We have Portugal Social Innovation as a hub. And also it was always coordinated at the center of the Portuguese government, along the different governments. And this is also crucial because, as Armel said, social innovation touches all areas of our lives. So we have dozens of projects on education, on health. And so to make effective links with public administration in these areas, it's important to have a political coordination at the center. And finally, just to highlight that on top of these specific instruments, we have, as I said, an activation team of regional representatives that work on the ground daily with entrepreneurs, social investors, municipalities, making bridges among them, helping them to transform good ideas into good projects, into good applications, and making the links with public policy as well. And this is one of the key success factors, being as close as possible to the ground, understand their needs, and making the bridges among different levels of our governance model. So it's quite demanding, but I can't imagine that this could be possible without European funds, not just for the budget availability, but mainly the flexibility of creating these blended finance solutions with a long-term perspective. So this is where I stop, and thank you very much once again for having me here.
Thank you so much, Felipe. And you mentioned, of course, the importance of different aspects of financing the long-term vision, but also the fact that we should focus on the sustainability of the solution and impact, not necessarily the particular entity entities themselves, I think is a very key point. And you know, you mentioned the municipalities and local development, how they're seeing this. And of course, the work on social innovation came out of the OECD's work on local development. So really aligns with that. Patricia, I know we wanted to get to some questions. So if you have a couple just very quick reflections on the sort of transition from start to scale and what you're seeing from the work that you're doing in the competence centers and in the foundation, if you could just very quickly address some of these issues to support sort of this transition.
Yeah, so but before we to scale, we need to understand what the scaling is for. So we are scaling out, up and deep, and then we have to think about a systemic rethink. And so in our perspective as a competence center, we would like to help what Felipe said, so to connect private and public stakeholders and bring and build strong public and private partnerships because it's very helpful to scaling social innovation and also promote synergies among the social innovation and social economy, and also promote synergies and structural link between direct and shared management, because we mentioned the Article 14 of the ESF regulation, and it's going into that direction, but we need a clear mechanism for information sharing and joint decisions to create complementary. And the National Competence Center acting as a facilitator could help social innovation become embedded in public policy. And
excellent. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
If I have 1 second more, I would like to underline what Felipe said about the focus is on the problem. We spend few time on defining what the problem is because we won't rush to find the innovative solutions, but we have to focus on the problem because each actor have a different perception of the same problem, and so we need to share a common ground also on what we want to face.
No, that's an excellent point. And I think this sort of accuracy of the problem definition and the time spent there has much more positive impact for then making sure that it's sustainable over time, because we really are addressing and having social impact on the solution to that well-defined problem. I'm going to now pass it over to Amal Chevreau, who leads up the unit on the social economy and social innovation. And many of you might have also known Antonella Noia, who also had for many years led up that unit and has recently retired. But I'm going to bring Amal up here because and you know, of course, her team has worked quite a lot on this report, including Bruno De Mena and Moi Shioijiri and several others. But maybe we could just take a look at some of the questions. You've been monitoring the chat, Amal, if you wanted to sort of take over and ask some of the panelists questions that have been coming up from our participants.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for all the people who joined. The chat is booming. I mean, we have people from many countries, and what's really good is that they've been engaging and asking questions, and we have a lot of comments, also a lot of links to examples, to initiatives on social innovation from different places in the world. So first of all, I want to reassure Ruth. I want to ask the question that you've already anticipated and answered. What's next? So well done, Ruth, on that. And I have a number of questions that I'll ask, but I'll have one for you nevertheless. You're not off the hook yet. And then I have one for at least for Felipe and Armel and Patricia, but I mean, really a lot of really good questions. So for instance, there is a question for you, Ruth, if you would like to take it, which is that from your, this question comes from Whitaker Dupin, who's leading the Euclid network, asking, for instance, if you can share a couple of opportunities or challenges that you and colleagues are seeing at the moment to further scale social innovation. I think this is something that's going to come up a lot in the discussion. The report provides a lot of examples of how to scale and everything, but people would like to hear a little bit more on the scale part. So if you have any further thoughts on that. Thank you.
Actually, yes, I will pick up some of the points that were made before, actually by the other speakers. One point I think Armelle made this is that it's very important that the public sector is the right public sector is involved from the beginning. Another point, which I can't remember who made, is the point of linking to the policy priorities. And here also you mentioned which challenges. I mean, for the moment, of course, there is the twin transition, but so digital and green. But we in DG Employment are always now talking about also the demographic transition. And that is the fact that we're all getting older. And I think that leads also to challenging on how to address various things. I mean, from the point of view of the labor market, we all have to work for longer, but we also changing work. I mean, the work is changing much faster, which means that people have to update, be reskilled, keep on top of the loop. And so how to make sure that people actually can seize the opportunities of growing sectors and update and reskill throughout their careers. Before, this was not such an issue because you had your own career and then retired, and there was a whole new cohort of young people that could take over the new things. But now it has to be the old people that take up the new things, if I can put it so bluntly. So I think this is a challenge. And then, of course, there's the challenge of very old age. I mean, what to do with with care. And there I was very impressed by the example that you mentioned on Germany on apprenticeships on geriatric care. So that's exactly. So to come back to your question, I think if there are examples, I mean, if there are ideas that address issues which are on top of the agenda of the policymakers, they will be more responsive. But of course, they have to be in the room to listen to the idea, if you see what I mean, because often the idea is very grassroots, and therefore it's important to involve them. And last but not least, I think for a risk-averse administration, it's important to have examples that work. So if you can say, I want to do this, and it was done in Czech Republic and it works, it helps.
Thank you very much, Ruth. So I'm just, I'm going to pull up like a couple of questions, but in the interest of time, we have to be very crisp to move to the closing. Okay. So there is a question on, for instance, and perhaps Philippe, you can take this one on reaching very small and medium enterprises with social funds is an opportunity, but it presents also a lot of challenges due to limited resources and so on. So a lot of people are asking how you can enhance the reach and impact of very small and micro-sized enterprises and their access to funding. I think your experience with Portugal could be useful as well in this.
Yes, thank you, Amal. And once again, congratulations for the reports, you and your team. And yes, actually, we came up with this challenge more than 10 years ago when the Portugal Social Innovation was created. And one way to get around it is, as I said, simplify the narrative, the public narrative, as much as possible. And also be as close as possible to the ground and to the small enterprises, small entrepreneurs, helping them along the way with the project, with the application as well, helping them also the execution of the project, because we have to overcome the gap that is on the knowledge and the experience that they actually don't have using public funds. So we provide guidance, we have formal guides, we have partnerships with other organizations that help them as much as possible. And incubators are a way to address these challenges. So we are very much worried about the small organizations. Most of the organizations that we are funding, I would say they are medium small. And 60% of the projects are not in the metropolitan areas. So we make a huge effort to reach everyone, everywhere. And, you know, some of the small things matter. One of the first things that we did was to remove any English word from our lexico in Portugal. Try to talk plain Portuguese with people that are not used to this kind of jargon, even the business jargon, because we are talking about small organizations or medium social organizations that are really specialists on the problem. They have incremental innovation and sometimes disruptive innovation to show, but they are not used to this kind of language. So we are very keen of these challenges, and we try to overcome it as much as possible, and also use all the mechanisms to simplify the funding model. And I think that today we were able to simplify the financing model of all the instruments that we have. And even I think that we are, even though we are using European funds, we are quite tolerant concerning the failure of these social innovation projects using the regulations that we have. So we try as much as possible to overcome this gap, but it's for sure an ongoing challenge.
Okay, thank you so much, Philippe. There is a question that was liked by many people, which is the relationship between social innovation and social and solidarity economy. So, Armelle, could you take this one? The people want to understand the what is what and how social innovation supports, or reinforces social and solidarity economy.
Right. I saw that actually. I mean, there are loads of discussions going on, super interesting in the chat. I'll try to clarify this because it's true. There's a lot of confusion often. Let's say that social and solidarity economy or social economy have some definition in some member states, not everywhere, but we know it's not the public, not the private. It can take the form of a private model, but not with the for-profit goal at the top. It is, I said, a fertile ground for social innovation. And we saw that many well-known social innovations, not to mention microcredits or, I don't know, ethical finance or whatever, came from that field. Well, as it was said by all of the speakers, and last was Felipe, social innovation is to find a new solution to a problem. I'm going to put it in simple words, that is not satisfactorily met and solved by existing solutions from the public and private sector. So there's a big scope for social economy here, but the problem could be solved by the public sector. The problem could be solved by maybe the academic sector, at least for the first phase. So that means you can have for-profit organizations that are involved in a partnership that is making socially innovative projects.
Great.
Okay. I hope it's clear.
Okay.
Can I say just one thing about scaling? Just not to forget that social innovation is context specific, which means you can't copy paste. Scaling means you have to adapt and adjust to your own context, and it takes time and it needs resources.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we have another question that was quite interesting, which is, and in the report we spoke about that, which is that a lot of people think that technological innovation and social innovation are, two completely separate things. They are, but social innovation is increasingly, or social innovators are increasingly using technology, apps, and so on. So perhaps, Patricia, if in what you've seen and what you're doing, what do you think, how do you think, using technology and these digital apps can maximize the impact of social innovation? And how do you see the future of using these apps in social innovations?
Yeah, of course, it's useful and also help to scale out innovative solutions. But what it's important, it's for example, in rethinking about public services with a social innovation approach and mixing with technological tools, we need to use a co-design and a human-centered design approach, because no one could be no one have to be off of this table. We have to bring all the resources on the table, and all the interests have to be represented. So especially when we speak about AI, we need to also spread the culture of data that are able to represent everyone, especially vulnerable subjects, and avoiding also which are the stereotypes that can make them not really included in the social services, for example, meaning and make them be able to access the service. So technological is a tool. It's but come after a design, a co-design, and human-centered design of what we want to achieve in facing pressing challenges.
Thank you so much. So just one final one, if you want to have, any of you want to have a stab at this, which is a lot of people were asking also about stakeholder buy-in, policymakers buy-in. You know, for instance, Philippe, you've talked about how you've succeeded because you've involved municipalities, but you've involved other types of stakeholders. So this issue of involving stakeholders and how to make sure that they're there from the beginning. So if you can have like just one final thought on this, because this came a lot in the questions.
Sorry, I wasn't able to
sure.
unmute
Go
myself.
ahead.
Well, final thought, just to say that we all agree on the priority that is to involve all the stakeholders. And the thing is, how do we do that? We do it in a formal way, making mandatory the validation of public administration and public policy on the alignment of the projects with public policy priorities in some of the cases concerning social impact bonds, for instance. It means that we have dozens of meetings with these high-level public policy organizations, with the boards of these organizations and directors, helping them to define priorities, providing capacity building to these organizations on what are impact indicators, for instance. It's not clear that public policies know how to do this. And we make these links with social innovators as well. So this is a formal way of bringing them together at a central level, much more easier at a regional, at a local government level as well. But it all comes down to the people and the person and the vision of the high-level policy officer that we have in front of us. Sometimes the institution is the same, but it changes the director and it changes the vision, and that's a possibility to create an effective. We were not successful yet in creating effective mechanisms that link innovations to public policies. We do it case by case. It depends on the circumstance. So that's one of the priorities that we have to develop in Portugal as well, from our perspective, create these effective formal links that can transform actually Portugal social innovation in a laboratory of future public policy. That's how I see social innovation funded with public funds. It's a lab for future public policies.
Thank you so much. A lot of questions. Feel free to reach out to us also at the OECD, and we'll be able perhaps to address some of them. I'm afraid it's all we have today for the Q&A. Back to you, Karen, for the closing. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. So I think we had just a couple opportunities for interventions from Ruth Passerman of the Commission and Nadim Ahmad from here at the Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions and Cities at the OECD. Ruth, did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share? And I think also Felipe just talked about some great ways to help make these social innovations more sustainable.
Indeed, I will be very short because I've already talked too much. I just want to thank again the OECD for this report, which is like a manual, very useful. Very happy with this event and the spreading also of this of the knowledge that these reports exist, and we will continue also to publicize it. And I really think it is helpful also for us for the programming of the next period. So thank you. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruth. Nada, any other final reflections on the 2 hours here?
Quite a few, actually, and I've taken down a lot of notes, but I'm going to be very brief. And I want to say thank you, first of all, to you, Ruth, again, I think to the Commission for the support of all of our work. And together, I think we've delivered a huge amount. And so thank you very much. But thank you also for the panel. I thought it was a fantastic discussion. So thanks, Philippe, Armelle and Patricia. And thanks to everybody that's been joining us. And, with all the questions, I think they've also, reinforced an awful lot of the messaging that you want to see coming through. And Adriana started off the discussion today by saying that we want to make sure we promote this globally. And I think that already we're beginning to do that just by this event today. I mean, the amount of people that we have online, the amount of questions that have been fed through, the amount of responses that we've got have certainly, I think, helped promote it. Patricia, you mentioned, I think, in your intervention as well, the importance of improving our understanding. And again, I think that we've achieved an awful lot, I think, of understanding today, partly because of the questions, but also partly because of the responses. Philippe, you mentioned the importance of understanding just the language issues. So very simple, I think, mechanisms that we have that can improve our understanding. So, I mean, that's, I won't labour the point too much, but I think that there are a few really important takeaways I wanted to reinforce. Armelle, I like very much that in one of your opening remarks, you mentioned, we need to involve policymakers at the right level from the beginning. And I think that's absolutely essential. But also I think that we need to make sure that there's a recognition that anyone can do social innovation. It's not just social economy actors, it's also the private sector as well. So of course, that's that coalition, I think, that's going to help us, I think, drive benefits from social innovation. So I'm going to leave it there. Like I said, I could go on for much longer because there's an awful lot, I think, to reflect on and to discuss. But thanks again enormously to everybody that's been able to join us today. And stay tuned as we continue, I think, to drive momentum on this really important area. Thank you all.
Great. So again, just to let you all know, as part of the message of this event was to share widely. So this event has been recorded so that for those that weren't able to join today, you'll be able to access it, as well as a summary of the really exciting discussions. I didn't see the 2 hours fly by. It was so interesting, and I think it really raised also some great opportunities for thinking in the future. Also, for example, on the ways to involve the private sector, the technology element, and as Nadim was mentioning, many issues, for example, on simplification. So a huge thanks again to all of those who have participated today, but also to those who were working behind the scenes to prepare this event. And just, on the Commission, want to especially thank Laura Mengen, who has been following this project within the teams that Ruth oversees, as well as, here at the OECD, Amel Chevreau, who leads up the unit, as well as some of the co-authors like Bruno Demena and Moe Chiodiri, and several other colleagues. So just a huge thanks to all of them who have supported also many different discussions, and a huge thanks also to all of those who participated in the focus groups around Europe in order to support the discussions and the good examples, so that we not only saw what's on paper and evaluations, but actually got to talk to people about what are the things that they thought helped contributed to the success of their social innovations using ESF. So thanks to all, and stay tuned for future activities in this space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.